Namaste Starlights. Welcome back to another video. I always appreciate you being here. And as always, I'm Kamala. I am a human. I am a licensed professional counselor and I'm a certified spiritual coach with another video. So the intention I want to set with this video, it continues to involve the theme of rest. So in the last long form video I posted, I talked about how we're resting in 2025. We're not running around, we're not doing anything crazy, right? We're not chasing after people who have already served their purpose in our lives. We are being mindful, right? And trying to stick in the present as much as we can. We're not getting too far ahead into the future, right? And we are, trying to put more play and rest into our lives. So once again, I wanted this to be a follow-up video because I had some more thoughts that came up for me this past week in relation to my multiple sclerosis. So if you're new here, I have multiple sclerosis, or MS. I was diagnosed in June of 2019, which was the spring before I was about to graduate grad school with my master's. So what a time to be diagnosed. And I have a video on my channel talking about my diagnosis story if you want to take a look. Something that I touched base on in that video is the fact that I was highly stressed at the time of my diagnosis. Now, there's no clear connection yet between chronic illness and stress. Like, stress within itself does not cause a chronic illness diagnosis. I would definitely say there is a connection in there, though, that needs to be looked at. And I say this because for me, I believe that one of the lessons my multiple sclerosis is trying to teach me is that of slowing down and resting. I may have mentioned in the video too, but the day literally the day before, I woke up with optic neuritis. So optic neuritis is when the veins, the optic nerves, it's when the optic nerves become inflamed, and it usually leads to like some loss of sight, right? Optic neuritis is usually in one eye, so for me it was my right eye. And I woke up one morning and I had this cloud of vision in my right eye. Pretty terrifying. But the day before, when I was journaling, and every time I think about this, I get goosebumps. But the journal entry, the first sentence is, "I am so stressed right now." I kid you not. If it wasn't for my journal and the fact that it's private, I would show it as proof. But that was literally the starting point of my last entry before being diagnosed with MS. And this past week, I've had a couple instances where so it really was my MS, I think, trying to remind me to slow down and rest. So with MS, there's a couple of things that can go on with it. Cognitive, physical. For me, I feel most of my symptoms are cognitive based. So my memory, which used to be really good, is no longer that great. Like, I wouldn't say I had picture perfect memory, but I could recall, oh yeah, this thing that happened a couple years ago, I had a pretty decent recollection of the past and the memories that I had. And now sometimes, I'll walk into a room and I'll leave something behind and I'll be like, where did I leave it? Or, You know, like I'll have conversations and I'll be like, I can't really recall what was said during that conversation. I have to be more intentional with note taking and memorization and things that I didn't necessarily have to do before. And that's difficult. That's been difficult for me in terms of the grief part of MS and just recognizing that my body is no longer the same, nor will it ever will be unless there's a cure that's found. But this past week, once again, I had a couple of instances that came up for me that are pretty vulnerable. But first instance is that I literally left the burner on the stove all night. That has never happened before. I believe I made food. I like used the pan on the stove, and I remember I was in such a rush to eat. I was hungry. I was a little bit cold. I wanted to get back up to the bedroom where it was nice and warm, and it must have blinked on me to just turn off the burner. And I remember the feeling of shame when I woke up the next day. I mean, because this was last week. This was not, this happened pretty recently. But I remember the feeling of shame when I went downstairs and I discovered, like, holy crap, like the burner was on all night. I mean, that's one, a safety hazard. It's electric, so thankfully not like, you know, there's a risk of carbon monoxide poisoning or anything, but still a hazard. And once again, first time it's ever happened. And I just remember the shame hitting me like a ton of bricks and being like, holy crap, like I can't believe this happened. So that's instance number one. Instance number two happened last Friday when I went to, I got in my car, or I went outside to my car because I had plans to go to the gym. And my car was dead, completely dead. And my neighbor, turns out, I left a note about, like, I left my lights on in my car. It either was the headlights or the interior light. I'm not exactly sure. But my car died. And that was also the first time I've ever had that happen. And so, you know, I had to call my insurance with the roadside assistance, and it got sorted out. I got a jump and my car is fine. But I just remember feeling so much shame because I had those two instances that past week where I've forgotten something that I've never forgotten before. That just kind of reminded me that my brain no longer works the way that I want it to. And I remember, you know, I'm like, okay, I need to process these feelings, right? And I was journaling about it, and I used the wrong version of here. I think I meant to put H-E-R-E, and I put H-E-A-R, and that triggered something in my brain, and I started crying. Something minute that I think I would have done even before MS, but I think just it was the thought of my brain's not cooperating with me. And I decided to listen to my body in that moment and just be like, all right. So I have what I call MS brain. So that's what I call it. When I forget things, when it's hard to recall, I call it MS brain because, once again, I tie it to my diagnosis. And so I was like, all right, what are these multiple instances of my MS brain trying to tell me? And I really think it's really screaming at me to slow down and rest. Even more slow than I have been moving, right? Once again, I was in a rush cooking that I forgot to turn off the stove. With my car, I think I was trying to rush to get out of the car and I left my lights on. Now I'm double and triple checking, right? But I say this for other people who may have multiple sclerosis or a chronic illness that affects kind of mental faculties. just the body in general, that slowing down is of the utmost importance. And if you don't have chronic illness, I wouldn't wish it on anyone, but to really slow down and to really just not run around crazy stressed before it's too late. And it sounds ominous, and it sounds like, it sounds dark, but I think part of it's true. I mean, who's to say if I had been moving at a slower pace of life in 2019, who's to say I still wouldn't have been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis? But I certainly don't think the stress helped at all. And with multiple sclerosis, one of the things they say about managing relapses is to minimize your stress, right? I always joke that I'm grateful to be on a DMT that I'm on. DMT stands for drug modifying therapy. It's the type of medication that you can get with a chronic illness. I'm on Ocrevus. So Ocrevus is a twice a year infusion, and it's one of the strongest DMTs you can get. They have different types like pills, injections. Infusions are usually the heavy hitters. And I'm very grateful, considering that I live in America and our healthcare system, that I've never had a problem receiving the care that I need. And I believe that has helped my life tremendously, because I still don't manage my stress the way that I should. And I decided enough is enough. I am very type A. I plan things to a schedule. If things don't turn out the way I want to turn out, I immediately feel my body tighten up, and I immediately feel my brain start to kind of close in on itself, and stress start to kick in. And I really am telling myself to not do that. So I once again practice mindfulness and just releasing and surrendering what's not in my control. With the car situation, for example, I panicked. I'm not gonna lie, y'all. I panicked for like a minute. I was like, okay, like, what am I gonna do? Like, even though I had the solution, which was to call roadside assistance, obviously the stress kicked in immediately, because that's my baseline that I'm working on. But I solved the problem, and I was able to get my car working in like 20 minutes. Roadside assistance was pretty quick. I got my battery checked. It was fine. I did everything I needed to do. So surrendering has been a big theme for me so far in 2025. Surrender what I can't control, whether it's other people's actions, because God knows we can't control that, and focusing on what's in my control, and recognizing that life is gonna life. We can't avoid that. And just, would I rather approach it panicked and stressed out, or would I just take it as it comes and still come to a solution, but not have my body react the way that it reacts? So there's this book, actually, that, now, I like a lot of spiritual influencers that I see. I don't have physical books. I use a Kindle. So the book that I read, and I read this about the end of last year, and it may be opposite when I show it, but it's called The Myth of Normal, by Gabor Mate and his son Daniel Mate. And I apologize if I'm butchering his name, right? But this book, it talks about the connection between chronic illness, so conditions like multiple sclerosis and cancer, to kind of how we live. And so it talks about stress. It talks about how people who have these chronic illnesses carry a certain subset of traits that other people with chronic illnesses may not. And this isn't all inclusive, right? Obviously, but this is based off of his research. So he mentioned some traits, kind of like people pleasing and just really striving to make other people happy, and holding in emotions, which holding in emotions can damage the body. I truly believe that. When we hold in stress, right, that's the cortisol, and that just, it wears away at things. But he talks about those subset of traits that people with these chronic illnesses have, or are more likely to have. And that book was really insightful. It blew my mind, honestly, because I could relate to that. Going back to the journal entry, I was carrying so much stress. Work, I was doing a full-time job on top of field work. So I was working upwards of 50 to 60 hours a week. And that's just part of the whole becoming a therapist, which is a systemic issue. But I just, and I was also going through personal stuff too at the time. It just wore at me. And then I would wake up and I can't see out of an eye. My body was like, we gotta change how we're doing things here, Kamala. Like, you can't keep pushing the way you've been pushing. And I told myself when I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis that I was going to change. I was going to handle stress differently. I was going to take care of myself. I was going to do all these things, because I did believe that it was a sign that I needed to do things differently. But was I perfect? No. I'm not going to lie to you, Starlights. Me and stress for like this, like, it's kind of been my baseline for the longest time, and I've decided I no longer want to function that way. And I thought I was doing okay, but then this past week, with those two incidences of MS brain, the stove and my car, it kind of proved otherwise. So this is why it's so important to slow down. Is there legit times where we have to be in a rush somewhere? Sure. But, also asking ourselves, do we need to stress out about this? And that's why I talked in the last video about making a mindfulness practice to just be for a little bit instead of do. And to no longer pursue things that aren't meant for us, even if it means letting go. And surrender is very hard. I tell my clients this. I don't say it with it's so easy to just surrender what's not in our control, because anxiety doesn't like that. Anxiety likes control. If we know everything, if we know what's going to happen, there's no reason to be anxious. But that's why anxiety exists. And part of it is mental as well as my own spiritual practice of just surrendering to a higher power. And for people that could be God or the universe or nature or whatever else people may choose to believe. And if people don't believe in a higher power, right, then still the concept of surrendering to kind of what is, right? That radical acceptance. Which radical acceptance says you don't have to like what's happening, or you don't have to like the person that is doing the thing, but acceptance helps so much with mental distress. If you find yourself resisting, you're not accepting. And I find myself doing that quite a bit. So I say this once again, if you have a chronic illness, you owe it to yourself to slow down. Otherwise, your brain or body is going to do like it did with me this past week, and it's going to tell you. It's going to be like, no, we're not doing this here. So I'm trying to take those moments and reframe that shame to, in a way, gratitude. I'm grateful I didn't burn the house down. And I'm grateful I was able to get my car started and it was fine. And I just need to slow down. So Yeah, I say that to you. I say that to everyone, once again, chronic illness or not. If you don't slow down, your body is going to do it for you, and it may not be pleasant. Multiple sclerosis is not pleasant. But I radically accept that it is what it is. I have this condition, and I'm seeing it as a gift in a way. It's not a good gift, but it's a gift to teach me to slow down. And even in that book, The Myth of Normal, he interviews other people with chronic illness. And there's like this quote with this woman who has MS. And one of the things she says is that, you know, it's allowed her to put herself first. And that's crazy to me. Like, as someone who's been so used to putting others first. And I'm even in a helping profession, right? But we have to have healthy degrees of selfishness. We have to. And so that is my message. My MS brain taught me a couple of things this week, and I wanted to share it with you guys. To just slow down. There's no point in rushing. The end is going to be there. You're going to reach the finish line. And I just want for people who also have chronic illness to take care of themselves. And if you don't have chronic illness, I, want that to be spared on you if possible. Once again, it's a gift, but it's not a gift that everyone wants. It's not a fun gift, but I take it as, once again, kind of as the universe's way of telling me to listen to my body and to slow down more. So that's it. And as always, I appreciate you being here. If you got to the end of this video and you enjoyed it, please feel free to like, to subscribe to my channel, and leave a comment telling me how you're going to rest. Are you going to do mindfulness practice, like meditate, or just go for a walk? Are you going to work out? Are you going to change your job? Are you going to maybe get rid of some unfulfilling relationships in your life? How are you going to rest this year, Starlight? So, as always, once again, thank you for being here. And I will see you in the next video. Namaste.